He appears on a city street as a homeless person, causing only indifference and contempt among passers-by. One policeman decides to show him his place, not suspecting that there is something more behind it. A simple bench turns into a stage where masks fall off and the truth goes live. And when the truth is revealed, no one can pretend that they did not see it. Don't forget to subscribe and like so you don't miss new stories. The first rays of dawn slowly made their way through the fog, painting the city in pale, almost transparent colors. The asphalt glistened from the night's rain, reflecting the weak light of the rare street lamps. The city was just waking up, still yawning and lazily stretching after the darkness. People walked past in a hurry, buried in their phones or covering themselves with their collars from the morning chill. Somewhere a dog barked, a garbage truck hummed, and only at the corner by the park everything remained motionless. There, on a modest bench of peeling metal and worn wood, sat a man. He looked like the type of homeless person you'd expect. An old beige raincoat that was clearly someone else's size, sleeves threadbare at the elbows, a woolen hat pulled down to his eyebrows, and a gray beard that covered half his face. There was a thermos next to him, and in his hands he was holding a paper coffee cup, empty. He wasn't eating, he wasn't smoking, he wasn't begging. He was just sitting there, staring straight ahead, as if he were waiting for something that had nothing to do with time, weather, or the people around him. Sometimes his gaze slid over the passers-by, not condemningly, not pleadingly. Rather with some strange calm of an observer who has already seen too much. The passers-by, however, almost never lingered their gaze on him. Some looked away with tension, some with habitual apathy. Some, noticing him too late, seemed to stumble with their gaze and quickened their pace. The security guard at the supermarket across the street, a young guy in a jacket with a private security patch, had been watching him for about half an hour. He went out for a smoke, then came back. Then he reappeared on the porch with a walkie-talkie in his hand. After a closer look, he frowned, put out his cigarette, and headed across the road. "Hey you," he shouted, not quite a few steps away. "This isn't a shelter. You can use the park until 8 o'clock this evening. It's too early now. Get out of here." The man slowly raised his head. His gaze was empty, but not broken. He did not answer. He only squeezed the glass with his palm so hard that it cracked slightly. "Why are you silent?" I said. "Go away." "Or should I call the police?" "This is a public place," he finally said in a hoarse voice. "I'm not bothering anyone. You're a nuisance here, old man. People are passing by, and you're sitting there like a monument to poverty. You should leave quietly." The man didn't move. He just looked away from the guard and out to the empty street, as if to say he still had the right to choose where to look. The guard spat at his feet, turned around and walked back, loudly clicking the door. From inside, they looked at the man through the glass for another minute, then lost interest. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, he touched his wrist under his sleeve. A faint light flickered. A recording started inside the hidden device. Image from the button on his coat, audio from the lavalier microphone hidden in his collar. Everything was quiet. Everything was unnoticeable. He remained seated. An hour passed. The city came alive. Workers began to arrive at the cafe on the corner. Couriers began to stir. One of them, a young guy with headphones, glanced in his direction and slowed down for a second, then walked past, frowning slightly. A girl in a jacket and sneakers saw him too late and abruptly changed her trajectory, as if she had run into a shadow. A man with a briefcase and a cup of coffee rounded a bench and muttered something under his breath. No one stopped. He watched. How people reacted, how they chose to look through, and how quickly they erased a person if they seemed out of place. Another half-hour later, a patrol car pulled up. Slowly. 2 people inside. One was driving, the other was the same Officer Martin he had been told about. 35 years old, short hair, trim, confident. Typical. Too typical. They parked slowly at the side of the road, exchanged glances. Martin got out of the car. "Good morning," he said, approaching. His voice was strained, already with a hint of irritation. "Do you have documents?" "I'm just sitting here," the man answered calmly. "Did you hear what I asked? Documents." He pulled a crumpled piece of paper out of his pocket, something like a copy of a driver's license. Martin glanced at it and winced. "Is this a printout? Where is the original?" "Lost it. Or stolen. So, no documents. Excessive stay in a public place. Possible violation of sanitary norms. Resistance during inspection. It all adds up. I don't resist." "Not yet." Martin grinned and motioned for his partner. "Hey, Jack, come here. We've got a philosopher here early in the morning." He came up and silently looked the homeless man over from head to toe. The man didn't react. He was still sitting. He was still holding his empty glass. "Get up," Martin commanded. "Let's get to the car." "I didn't do anything wrong," the man said quietly. "I'm just a human being. You are a nuisance, and now you will find out what they do with nuisances." Martin grabbed him by the elbow. The man stood up, but his gaze remained calm, direct, as if he knew that behind every movement there was a gaze, that behind every word there was a recording, that the truth would not disappear into the shadows this time. And somewhere, far away from here, in the studio, monitors were glowing. On the screen was everything that the button saw, everything that the microphone heard, and the people on the other side of the glass were waiting for the mask to finally fly off the faces of those who considered themselves the pinnacle of order. But for now, he just walked, not resisting, not accusing, just keeping one thought in his head. I'm not here to break. I'm here to show. He stood with his shoulders slumped, as if he were not resisting the air itself, and allowed Officer Martin to drag him across the pedestrian area like a sack of useless material. People around him stopped, not out of compassion, but rather curiosity. Some were filming with their phones, others were simply watching from the sidelines, sullen or indifferent. One man in a business suit grimaced, whispering to his companion, "This is why we have shelters, so they can sit there, not here." She nodded, not looking at anyone, checking her phone notifications. Officer Martin stopped at the hood of the patrol car, turned the homeless man around and, pressing him against the metal, began patting his clothes, searching him. His hands moved quickly, roughly, as if this was not a body but a burlap sack in which a threat might be hidden. "Turn your pockets inside out, everything you have, quickly. Don't make me repeat it," he said. "I have nothing," he answered calmly. "You already know that." "How do you know that I know? Maybe you're psychic?" Martin snorted, looking over his shoulder at his partner. "Jack, look at this philosopher. He's got a better tongue than half our sergeants." Jack, silent and massive, stood a little apart, his arms folded across his chest. He did not interfere, but he did not look away. There was something uneasy in his face, not fear, but doubt. Marlowe, watching him, noticed it. Even through the dirt that had been deliberately left on his face and clothes, his gaze remained clear. He was not registering actions, but reactions, not words, but the tension between words. "What? You're silent." Martin pushed him a little harder than necessary. "Or maybe you're pretending? Maybe you're not homeless at all? Maybe you have millions in your account? Or are you a terrorist? Tell me, why have you been hanging around here since 5 in the morning? Who sent you?" "Nobody," he replied. "I came myself." "Seriously? By yourself? Just sat on a bench in the very center? Do you even know how much apartments cost in this area? People here pay more in taxes than you weigh." 3 teenagers gathered around the car. One was already broadcasting live, another was commenting on what was happening in a low voice. Harsh. He does nothing, but they put pressure on him. "Yes, it's a classic," answered the third. "Look, he'll get some pepper vodka now." Martin actually pulled out a canister. He brought it closer to the homeless man's face. "Now look away. This is the last time I'm warning you. I'm not attacking. I'm not even moving, he said with a slight hoarseness. That's what you think, but I think you're already a threat. The threat is in your head, officer, he added quietly, not in me. That was the last straw. Martin pressed. The gas hit him square in the face, and the man winced, closing his eyes, but he didn't flinch. He didn't scream. He didn't lunge. He just held the pain in, as if he knew it was temporary. The crowd howled. "Hey!" shouted a woman from the next kiosk. "Why are you doing this? He's okay." "Step aside, ma'am," Martin snapped. "We're following protocol." "What is your protocol? To gas unarmed old men? He could be anyone. We can't take any risks." Marlowe sank to his knees, coughing. His eyes were watering. Something else was trembling inside his suit, not pain, but tension. The camera in his button was recording everything. He knew it was live. He knew the editor would already be on the news. That the signal was being duplicated on multiple feeds. That his pain right now was a reflection of dozens of others. And if all went as it was supposed to, it would change something. Maybe not right away, but it would start to. "Jack, help me with the handcuffs," Martin ordered, taking them out from behind his belt. "Maybe we should call the duty lieutenant," Jack muttered. Maybe that's enough?" "Are you soft?" Martin said through clenched teeth. "We're doing as we were taught. That bastard can't think he can sit wherever he wants. I'll show him the street." He didn't resist when they dragged him to the car. Not because he was weak, but because he had a goal. He had the truth. And the camera, rolling the whole time, captured every detail, every word, every drop of humiliation. And across town, in the news studio's production room, a green light came on. Someone spoke into the microphone. "He's ready. The signal has been sent to broadcast. Make sure the microphone is clear. In 10 minutes, we'll show America what it means to judge by appearances." Meanwhile, in the police car behind bars, Chuck Norris, still in character, looked out the window and quietly said, "It's not a matter of minutes. It's a matter of seconds." He knew the climax was near. Just a little more, and the masks would fall off. For everyone. The police car sped through the streets, its headlights cutting through the asphalt with morning light and a hum that echoed off the glass facades of sleeping buildings. The car smelled of cheap air freshener, rubber, and tension. Martin was behind the wheel, his knuckles white. Jack stared out the window, not making eye contact with the man in the back, handcuffed to the rail. His face was still stained red from the pepper spray, but his breathing had evened out, and his eyes were clear and focused, like a man who knew exactly where he was and why. "Do you think that was too much?" Jack asked suddenly, breaking the silence. "What, too much?" Martin snorted. "We're doing our job. This vagabond shouldn't be hanging around where normal people go to work. The park, the center, the shops. That's not for them. If he wants help, let him go to a shelter. If he wants the street, let him know that he's not welcome there." "But he—" Jack trailed off. "He didn't even resist." Martin chuckled. "Yeah, because I knew he'd get caught. So calm, so humble. That's the most suspicious thing. I don't like people like that. They always pretend they're harmless, and then bam, you're in the hospital. I'd rather be safe than sorry." The detainee sat behind him, not reacting. Not to the conversation, not to the tension in the air. His gaze slid over the streets, behind which was hidden everything that was happening not before his eyes, but behind them. He heard the coded correspondence going on in Martin's headphones over the intercom. He heard him acknowledge the call. He understood. They were not taking him to the police station, but somewhere off to the side, somewhere without prying eyes. Everything was going according to script, even a little harsher than he expected. But he was ready. They stopped at an old hangar on the outskirts. The building, half abandoned, had once been used as a storage facility for decommissioned equipment, but now it looked like the set of a dark truth movie. Martin turned off the engine and turned to Jack. "Listen, you don't have to butt in. I'll do it myself. I'll just talk. Calm him down. You know, prevention. Like, he'll think about the future. Jack nodded doubtfully. He didn't want to get involved, but refusing to do so would be an admission of weakness. He stayed in the car. Martin opened the door and pulled the detainee out. He walked calmly, without resistance, still breathing with restraint. It was cool inside the hangar, smelling of dust, gasoline, and something metallic. The light from the window fell in stripes, drawing lines across the floor. "Okay, philosopher," Martin began as the doors closed. "Let's be honest. Who are you?" "You've already decided who I am," the man replied. "I'm just a man, from the street. That's what you said. Don't be a fool. You speak too plainly. You act too confidently. Where did you live? Where are your documents? Why didn't anyone report you?" Martin started walking in circles. "Huh? Do you have special training? Or are you a spy? What if I just exist, without a legend, without a plan, just living, as best I can?" "Yeah, but you don't live. You observe. You look at everyone as if you're writing something down. Who are you? A journalist? A provocateur? What if I'm a mirror, showing you what you don't want to see?" Martin came closer, a fire in his eyes. "You're asking for trouble." "No, you are opening up." A pause. The invisible tension in the air cracked, like a thin film between patience and rage. Martin swung. The blow landed in the stomach. The man doubled over, coughed, but did not fall. He just straightened up. Looked into his eyes. "All this is on air. Did you know?" Martin froze. "What did you say?" "Live. Right now. Your words, your actions, in the face of millions." Martin rushed to him, pulled at the collar of his coat, began to look for a camera, a microphone, but it was too late. At that moment, a signal came into the earphone lying in Jack's pocket. He turned on the receiver, heard the announcer's voice. "And in a few minutes, we will open the broadcast that thousands have been waiting for. Today, America will see the truth. Not an act, not a script, but reality." Jack ran out of the car and burst into the hangar. "Martin, stop!" But Martin had already broken loose. He pushed the man, who fell, but still watched silently, too calmly, as if he knew that any moment. And then a voice came from the wall of the hangar, loud and clear, like from a theater. "Stop, officer. The camera won't turn off even when you turn your back." The spotlight hit Martin in the face. The hangar door opened. Cameras. People. A film crew. Loudspeakers. The man stood up. He pulled off his hat. He wiped the makeup off his face. He looked up. "Hello, America. My name is Chuck Norris, and now you have seen how easily dignity can become a target." The crowd froze. Journalists surrounded the hangar. In the car, Jack sank into the seat and closed his eyes. He realized the truth was out, and now there was no way to push it back. The screams outside merged into a rhythmic hum, as if the city itself had begun to breathe faster, sensing that its nerve had been touched. People running to the hangar were filming on their phones. Some were doing a live broadcast. Some were just standing there, their palms pressed to their mouths. Cameras from major TV channels appeared faster than the police. Several journalists were already reading out headlines, simultaneously receiving instructions in their headphones. There were still 3 people standing inside. One was now without makeup, with a wiped face and slightly disheveled clothes, but with incredible calm in his voice and gaze. The second was standing rooted to the spot, as if Martin had run out of electricity. The third, Jack, was breathing as if after a hard run, looking alternately at his partner, at Chuck, and at the open doors, where the light of the spotlights cut through the dust. Chuck walked slowly toward Martin. He didn't shout. He didn't accuse. He spoke as those who are sure of every word speak. "You didn't know who was in front of you, and that's why you showed who you are. I didn't come here to take revenge, not to provoke, but to remind you, dignity doesn't depend on clothes. It doesn't get erased by dirt. It doesn't get lost in smell or sitting on a bench, but your uniform isn't armor. It doesn't make you bigger, it makes you more visible. Martin couldn't say a word. Everything that was happening was knocking the last islands of control out of him. He looked at Chuck as if he were an obsession. He didn't believe it. He didn't accept it. He didn't understand how it could have turned out like this. You had no right to do that, he muttered. We? Chuck raised an eyebrow. I said nothing. You hit, you humiliated, not in front of me, in front of hundreds who were in the same situation. You gave a voice to those you wanted to shut up. He turned to Jack. And you knew, you felt, but you didn't stop. You chose to remain silent. It's almost the same as hitting yourself, but you had a chance, and you can still use it. Jack looked down. I didn't know all this. What? That they're filming you? That they'll see this? But the truth is, if there weren't cameras, you'd still be standing there, right? No answer was needed. His silence was already part of the answer. Outside, someone shouted a name. The cameras were even closer. The microphones. One of the operators was already broadcasting live. Famous actor, martial artist, and public figure Chuck Norris has staged a large-scale social experiment, dressing up as a homeless person and showing what millions face every day. Right now, he is going out on the streets to deliver an appeal. Chuck stepped toward the door. The crowd exploded with flashes and noise. He didn't wave. He didn't pose. He just stood there, letting the silence fall between his words. I'm not a hero. I'm not against the police. I'm against blindness. Against force without conscience. Against form without heart. Everything you saw was true. Not staged. Not a show. It was an ordinary day. In an ordinary country. For millions of people like me today. Only they don't take off their makeup at the end. One woman in the front row burst into tears. The man next to her silently took off his hat. A random teenager filming everything on his phone lowered his camera and just watched. I was sitting on a bench, and someone decided that I was a problem, just because I didn't look like them. Think about it. How many times have you passed by, turned away, pretended not to notice? Each time is a choice, and each of you can make a different one. He took a step forward. Those in power are not gods, but those at the bottom are not shadows either. We are all part of one whole, and we can be better. Only if we start to see. The words, spoken calmly, without strain, penetrated deeper than any scream. The reporters froze. Some turned off their cameras, realizing that this was not a story. It was a story. He turned around. Martin was still standing in the hangar doorway, frozen as a marble statue. Jack was nearby, but slightly to the side, in tense shadow. Officer, Chuck said, looking at him. You're not in uniform anymore. You're just a man now. What are you going to do now? Martin looked at the ground, silent, and Chuck turned to the crowd. Let this not be the end. Let this be the beginning of a conversation. About you. About us. About everyone who needs to be seen. Real. The crowd buzzed. Not like at a concert. Like at a square where the truth was told. Soon the police leadership appeared. The press service. The bustle began. Protocols. The cameras were still filming. But in the center of this storm, Chuck stood calmly. He knew the main goal had been achieved. The face of a man, without a mask, without makeup, was stronger than a bulletproof vest. And he gave this face a voice. A week passed. The city had not yet fully woken up, but the streets were already full of people talking about what they had seen on the broadcast. The video of the experiment spread instantly, like a virus of truth, crashing into every news feed, into every home kitchen, into every heart that had ever turned away from a man lying on the sidewalk. No one was left on the sidelines. Some were indignant, others made excuses, and still others tried to explain that everything had been taken out of context. But you can't outplay a face, and you can't forget the eyes. in which there is no malice, only patience. Chuck Norris did not give endless interviews. He did not travel on talk shows, did not appear on covers, although there were more requests than at any time in recent years. He simply disappeared from view, as befits a man who does not seek fame, but follows meaning. Reports were replaced by other news, but in some cities, approaches were already beginning to change. Several precincts began to revise service instructions. Hotlines for reports of abuse of power appeared. Several schools began to discuss a new course on social interaction and civic responsibility. Officer Martin was suspended. The investigation was formal, but public opinion was unambiguous. His behavior was deemed unethical, even by the outdated protocols. The city newspaper printed an open letter from a family whose daughter, in a similar situation a year ago, was left without help and died. No one knew her name then. But now they did, because the story had become more than just one incident. It had become a symbol. And in another part of the city, far from the center, in a small park with shabby benches and creaky swings, a man was sitting again. His coat was no longer made up. His face was recognizable. But passers-by no longer turned away. He drank coffee from a paper cup, kept his hands on his knees, and simply looked. A teenager passed by, stopped. He took off his headphones. "It's you, right?" "The very one." "I'm just a man," Chuck replied, not taking his eyes off the road. "Just like you." "But you changed everything." Chuck smiled. Lightly, barely noticeably. Nothing changes alone, only when someone is watching and doesn't turn away. The teenager nodded and sat down next to him. They were silent. An hour later, a man with a dog joined them, then an elderly woman with a bag of vegetables. No one spoke loudly. They just sat. Time flowed like a river in which you don't need to swim, just be. And this, perhaps, was more important than all the speeches. Somewhere across town, Jack stood in his boss's office, clutching a statement. He read it out loud, slowly. Each point. At the end, silence. His commander looked at him for a long moment. Then he sighed. "You are sure?" "I'm sure," Jack replied. "I can't keep quiet any longer. I've seen what it means, and now I can't help but see it." He didn't go home. Instead, he came to the same park. He saw Chuck. He came up to him and sat down next to him. "I left the station. I know. I don't think I'm a hero, not even close. Heroes are not born. They become heroes when they do something that is important not only for themselves. And then? Then you choose for yourself where to look and who to be like." The sun rose slowly, bathing the city in golden light. 3 people sat on a bench in the park. One of them had once become nobody, so that everyone could see what it meant to be somebody. And maybe that was just the beginning.